to infinity and beyond.
This is me. This is how I win.
Were you rushing or were you dragging? Answer!
You're a wizard, Harry.
Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
No, I am your father.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained?
And here we go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the film room. Zach Goins here with Johnny Sobchak for a very wet episode of Inside the Film Room. we are talking Avatar: The Way of Water. Rebecca is giving me a glare through the window here. It's getting wet on the episode because Big Dick Jim is back. That's how we're starting off this episode. Johnny, as you can tell, I'm very excited to talk about Avatar: The Way of Water. I know you are too, but how are you? How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, thanks. I know you're even more excited than I am, I think. We both love this movie, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, it's been a little while since we had our last show. I've been doing well. I've been doing a lot of movie watching over the last couple weeks to get prepared, just for get caught up for the end of the year, and also importantly for voting for North Carolina Film Critics Association and getting our nominations submitted on time. And then we have our final awards voting will be in the next week or so. So it's been busy. It's been fun. It's been thankfully a lot of good movies and even great movies, and going back to the theater now for Avatar and everything, because there was a little bit of a down kind of time there, I think, since like Black Panther, for example. So yeah, we got plenty to talk about, and I'm excited to dig into it all. How are you doing?
I am in the same boat, my friend. I know a lot of, like you said, the screeners. We talked last episode about all of the screeners and trying to prioritize like what we're going to be able to watch and whatnot. And I've been very dedicated. I feel like very committed to like sitting down. I think of like the last 7 nights, I watched a movie, 6 of them, like watched a couple of extras like in between. Like I've been cranking through some of these, like you said. So really getting down to the wire to get our nominations in. I submitted mine this morning, my nominations, and then we'll see, like you said, what comes of it, what we're actually voting for NCFCA here soon. But yeah, just a lot of movie watching, a lot of prepping for the holidays, getting ready for some travel. But really just excited for this episode. We're talking Avatar: The Way of Water. We're talking about some big news that's come out, some big trailers, big superhero stuff. And then I figured we could just have, our little what's going on general movie catch up, since it has been a couple weeks since we last talked, since we have watched so many movies. Didn't want to just skip over all of those. So I figured we could just, chat it up. So Johnny, what's been on your TV lately? What have you been watching?
Oh man, so many. And I've also been trying to sprinkle in some more holiday kind of festive movies as well.
See, I have not gotten to do that yet. Rebecca and I were literally like, we haven't watched a single Christmas movie yet.
Right.
Which usually, like, I was very on top of it for Halloween this year. I watched like 12 spooky season movies, and then now have yet to watch on December 18th, have yet to watch anything holiday related. So it's all been award season.
Yeah, no, I feel you there. But yeah, I've tried to sneak in some stuff. I was doing some work like maybe last week or something, and I threw on The Grinch, the Jim Carrey one, which is one of my favorites, like growing up as a kid. So yeah, I always like to throw that on around this time. Also watched for the first time The Apartment, the Billy Wilder film from 1960. Classic, like this won Best Picture, like it's a very like famous movie, but I had never seen it and I absolutely loved it. Billy Wilder, I really like Double Indemnity as well. If you've never seen that, I highly recommend that. But yeah, I really loved it. It is very much like a Christmas, New Year's, like that time frame sort of movie. And like just an epic like rom-com, like one of the best scripts, I feel like. Um, and it was just a lot of fun. Then also I watched Black Christmas, the original 1974, which is this really kind of the first slasher movie a lot of people consider it to be. And it's set around Christmas time. It takes place at the sorority house, and it is very much like a bare bones, not just like low budget, of course, and but it's just a lot of kind of fun, creepy, not super violent, but definitely like very much like I said in the slasher kind of vein. So that was cool to check that out. And I think outside of that, I have been really kind of cramming in the awards movie. So I got to finally watch After Sun. I got a screener for that from A24. Really loved that movie. It's one of my top 5 movies for the entire year, I would say. And one that like really just like I had a lot of hype. I think it's like the most critically acclaimed movie of like the entire year. And like really like beat me down because it's a very like emotional like movie. And I just kind of watched it late one night, and then I had to go to bed like thinking about what I had just seen. So definitely recommend that movie, but be prepared for that. And then I also got to see finally All Quiet on the Western Front, which I think originally came on a Netflix either earlier in November, maybe even going back to October. The new kind of adaptation. It's a German adaptation of the classic novel, and again, just an epic, horrible, nightmarish like war film. I know they don't do like a ton of World War One movies, at least like big budget like World War One movies, so much anymore. And I would say I prefer this even to like 1917, which came out a few years ago at this point. But this one definitely, it's a German film, but it certainly, and it's released by Netflix, but it felt less Hollywood to me than like the 1917 movie, which was by Sam Mendes. This was like very dirty, very like scary. Like it definitely is probably the best like depiction of World War One like combat that I've seen. And so that definitely recommend that if you have not seen it. I feel like that's gone completely under the radar for a lot of people and just been kind of forgotten about. So definitely give that a chance. Check it out on Netflix. Also got to see a screening of Babylon finally, which we will probably talk about more in depth probably in the next week or two. And I really enjoyed that. I know it's been more of like a mixed reception, I think. You didn't like it quite as much as I did. You also got to see it early, and but it's such a big, bombastic, very much rated R kind of drama that we don't see like too much anymore. So I say definitely go out and support that when it comes in and hits theaters in the next week or so over the holiday.
I feel like I liked it more than I expected to. I feel like because
yeah,
just like knowing my style of movies, like just the kind of movies that I like. I remember we've talked about it on this podcast a couple times with like our friend Josh and I, like having just very distinct, like there's a certain type of movie that he loves and I don't like, and he loved Babylon. So I straight up asked him, I was like, am I gonna like this? And he said, I think you actually like sort of will. And he was right. I feel like there was a lot of just like stuff that was thrown at you. Some of it worked, some of it didn't. It definitely was a little long for me. I felt like it was like I was cruising through like the first 2/3, and then like it kind of slowed down a little bit at the end. The length caught up on me, but fun Brad Pitt, fun Margot Robbie, a lot of just like craziness that it kind of combines. Like I've seen a lot of people saying it's the best like Baz Luhrmann movie ever. Obviously it's not a Baz Luhrmann movie, but like the same, like it's what The Great Gatsby wanted to be, sort of energy. But I had enough fun with it to enjoy it.
You would give it the recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like not just like a blanket recommendation, like everyone go see this. I feel like I wouldn't tell like my 2 college roommates, I would not tell them to watch it just because like it's not up their alley. But like in general, like I would give it a thumbs up. I would say that I enjoyed it.
Okay, fair. Yeah, it's definitely, like I said, it's a hard R, so there's a lot of like gratuitous like violence and sex and drugs and all that stuff. So to me, I ate that up. I am curious to see how it holds up on rewatch. I do want to see it again in theaters, hopefully, because that'll be coming out soon. So definitely want to see that again, but I did like it quite a bit. And then really I got some rewatches in there. I rewatched White Noise for the first time. Um,
Boo.
that held up so well. I loved it even more, I think. So keep an eye out for that coming up. Comes out on Netflix around New Year's. And so I'll be speaking more on that soon. Tar, I also was able to rewatch. God, that is just a peak cinematic like work right there. I'm in love with that movie. I already got the 4K pre-ordered, should be coming the next couple of days. And I'm already like dying to watch it again. So yeah, still very much love Tar. So give that a look when you can. And then of course Avatar, which we'll be speaking about. And then so I also got to see Puss in Boots: The Last Witch, which I know you also saw, Zach, and you also liked it. I think I might have even liked it a little bit more than you did, but it is definitely a kind of return to form, I feel like, for the DreamWorks kind of animation. Although they did have the bad guys earlier this year, I believe. And I also liked that one. I think they had a better year than Disney did, as a matter of fact. I don't think that's necessarily a hot take, but I thought those were both good, like family movies. And I think Puss in Boots was even superior to the bad guys. It's not it's definitely better than the original Puss in Boots, which I still liked. But I didn't think that one was on par with like the original like Shrek or the Shrek 2. But I think this Puss in Boots is like more in line with those and like kind of harkens back to that. And the animation style is different from all those other movies. Like they definitely switched it up. And I said this on Twitter. I think it feels very much like kind of a reaction to like Into the Spider-Verse, which is a few years old at this point. But I can't really think of any other Hollywood like animated movies in the last few years that feel like they took inspiration from like Into the Spider-Verse and like really went all out with just
Yes.
imagination and the style of action and
I I was very curious because I was not I like had zero intention to watch this whatsoever. Like we got the screening email. Like I love
yeah,
the original first and second Shrek and like saw the third one as a child, but didn't see like Shrek the fourth or the Puss in Boots movie or anything. But like I got this email and kind of immediately just like, okay, put it in the folder, not really planning to watch. And then you like posted about it being fantastic, and I was like, hold up a minute. And I saw some other good reviews, and you said that Spider-Verse thing, and I had no idea what you meant by that. And then once I watched it, I was like, that was so spot on because
yeah,
it's like it almost has like different animation styles like being cut in,
yes,
like you said, with the action. It almost felt like there were like anime elements to it rather
yeah.
than just like a straight up like Shrek CGI animation, like a Pixar style animation.
Yeah, no, you're 100% spot on, especially about like that you mentioned like the anime kind of inspiration. I think that's really strong as well. Not like any one specific anime, but I just think the style of certainly like the action sequences, but also the kind of mixing and mingling of certain animation styles and the kind of like some parts of like the humor, just the ways certain characters are like depicted, especially like the more villainous characters, I would say.
The
I thought,
wolf is horrifying. The
oh my
wolf
gosh,
and Big Jack,
Jack Horner.
Big Jack Horner. Great performance by John Mulaney, but that character design is like nightmare fuel.
Yeah, it's a really like there's genuine kind of like anxiety and kind of edge of your seat, I would say, moments in this movie, which I feel like you don't feel that much in animated movies. So I was a big fan of that. You mentioned on Twitter, Zach, I didn't get to this part in kind of my little raving about it, but the end of this movie, not only the way the movie wraps up itself, like the story, which I quite liked, and like it kept me like on my toes because I wasn't really sure which direction it was going to end up going. But the way it wraps up and kind of leaves things, I want to see another one of these movies. Like I definitely want a sequel. I want to see more of the characters and like kind of what it alludes to their next story being.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's like a lot of potential there, and if it's anything like as far as like quality compared to this one, I think that it would definitely be worthwhile. So hopefully people will go out and support it and see it, and we'll get another Puss in Boots because I thought this was a
Yeah,
really pleasant surprise.
this may be my surprise of the year, considering like I said, I was not even planning to watch it, and then it's sneaking in here the last 2 weeks of the year, and I gave this on Letterbox. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was a 78 out of 100, like second only to Pinocchio, Guillermo del
Mm.
Toro's Pinocchio on my rankings for animated movies this year.
Right.
But the tweet you were referencing, I said I'm not going to spoil what happens in it, but I said that the last 10 seconds of this movie are more exciting, get me more hype than any Marvel post credits, mid credits stinger in the last 3 years. It was just like my inner childhood being excited, my, like you said, the potential for a future Puss in Boots movie. So yeah, I'm all in on this, and I know you've been raving a little bit, but to get my 2 cents in here, like I thought the voice cast was excellent. I had no idea that we were gonna have, again, I did not know much about this movie at all, but Florence Pugh is in here, John Mulaney's in here, Salma Hayek, Antonio Banderas, obviously. Really, really solid voice cast across the board, and not just like in the big name aspect, but they all deliver. Olivia Colman as well is Mama Bear. But it had that same
Yes.
sort of like Shrek whimsy of like combining all of these fairy tale elements that are, just like, what's the legal term, like their the IP is like public domain, that's
Yeah.
it. So like, Goldilocks and Hansel and Gretel and stuff, like Pinocchio, all of those that anybody can get their hands on.
Yeah.
Which, again, I hadn't seen that first Puss in Boots movie, but that's one of the things that people love about Shrek, is just like the way that it blends fairy tales all together. So yeah, I was very pleased with this movie, and I want more. I'm very excited. I hope it does really well at the theater. It comes out this coming Wednesday. So hopefully it's set up for a good holiday run with families.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So enough about me though. I know we talked about some overlap, some different things that we'd seen together, but anything else that you have seen on your own? Anything? I know you said you hadn't seen too many holiday movies, but as far as awards potential?
Yes. I know we have talked about, well, you have talked about Close. That was the official Belgian submission for foreign film at the Oscars.
Yes.
You watched it at Film Fest 919. There's a review on the website of it. But I finally saw that this past week and was very, very enamored by it. It's a very heavy emotional movie. But it's also like very poignant, and like it's important, the story that it's telling. It's a very abrupt shift in your mood and what the emotions that it's channeling for you are. And I was not prepared. Like, I knew that there was going to be like some shift, but I didn't think it was going to be that heavy. And so you need to be in the right headspace for this movie.
Yeah.
I saw Babylon as well, which we just talked about. Puss in Boots, Avatar, I've seen it twice. Caught Bones and All on a screener probably a couple weeks ago at this point. And then Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, which I mentioned as well, was very, very blown away by that. Just like the practicality of it all, the puppets, it was very impressive. Again, another excellent voice cast across the board there. Very strange to be listening to that and be like, wait, this is Professor Filch. This is Walder Frey playing Geppetto here
I know.
from Harry Potter and from Game of Thrones.
He was great.
And then and Ewan McGregor as well is great as Jiminy Cricket there. And I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the voice of Pinocchio, actually, the child performer, was fantastic. So that was really impressive. Again, two really solid animated movies coming in here at the end for me, because I was really having a sort of hard time coming up with really quality animated movies that I had seen this year. I was like, man, am I gonna have to put like Lightyear on here? But those two at least saved the day. And then I watched The Whale and Resurrection to finish my movie screenings over the last couple weeks. And on the TV side, Sex Lives of College Girls wrapped up another fantastic season, except the final 2 episodes still had some good stuff in it. But the way the storylines that happened here, I'm not going to get into it too much since it would just be a very one-sided conversation. But very, very upset with some of the stuff that's going on. I feel like some questionable decision making happened here, but overall, 8 of the 10 episodes were fantastic. I know this was one of the ones that the first season came out last year, but I watched it at the start of this year, and I had said like this would have been like number 1 or number 2 for me had I seen it last year. Missed it by like a week. but yeah, another solid outing from them. So excited, and that got renewed for season 3. So majority of my time has been spent with movies rather than TV, as it should be for a movie podcast. But we'll save the details for Avatar for a few minutes from now. But let's get into some news from this week, Johnny, and kick us off with all of the consistent changes. You know, we talked about the big change at DC with James Gunn coming in. Everything is still very much in flux, but what's the latest there? What are we working with?
Yeah, that's a good question, right?
Yeah, the latest seems to change quite frequently.
Yeah, well, it's all bets are off at this point. I'd say leading off with the biggest news is that kind of what shocked everyone, I think what's gotten the most rumblings as of late, is James Gunn just this past week came on Twitter pretty much out of the blue and said, just had a meeting with Henry Cavill, me and Peter Safran, who's co-head of DC Studios, co-president and CEO. And he said that, you know, the meeting went well, that they had their kind of back and forth, but the decision to move forward was that Henry Cavill will no longer ever again seemingly play Superman in this new universe that he's trying to establish, James Gunn. He said the main and critical factor was that they want to have a younger Superman and kind of start fresh from earlier in his career, did not have any baggage, and that so that was the decider. I mean, Henry Cavill, he's going to be turning 40 soon. Could still play Superman. Obviously, he would just be a bit older and cannot pass for someone who maybe is supposed to be like closer to our age, for example. So that'll be that got a lot of buzz going. And also coming out of that story, and also coming out of what James Gunn commented on in the following like 24 hours or so after that announcement, was that this Superman is going to be not an origin story movie. It's not going to be like Man of Steel, showing him becoming Superman for the first time. He's already going to be Superman. To me, it almost sounds like, and other people have said this online, it almost sounds like what he's going to be doing is taking a note from like the Batman's book with Matt Reeves.
That was my impression as well.
And like, it's not going to be an origin film, but it is going to be showing him still coming into who he's going to be and not being a complete rookie. You know, with the Batman, you know, Bruce was already established as the Batman, and he was someone who was already having a relationship with Gordon. He, you know, it wasn't like they were meeting for the first time and that was all, you know, groundwork being laid. They already had some sort of relationship working together. And so that I think that would be a good way. It sounds like from what James Gunn is implying that he will probably already know people like Lois Lane, maybe Jimmy Olsen could potentially be a character they want to use going forward, who in the comics is Superman and Clark Kent's like best friend, basically. And, you know, Lex Luthor, maybe there's some sort of existing relationship there. It's unclear at this point all the characters that could be involved. But it does sound really interesting. And the other key factor to this, which we haven't talked about yet, is that James Gunn said he himself is going to write this Superman movie and is in fact already well into the stages of that script. So that is super exciting to me. I'm curious to hear a little bit more how you feel about that, but I think that James Gunn is proven as a comic book and superhero creator, you know, for both film and television. Peacemaker, The Suicide Squad, Guardians of the Galaxy. He's had some input in the Avengers movies, of course. Now we had the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special as well, and Disney Plus that's come out. So he's been pretty much batting 100 for me.
Yes.
I'm curious though, like, what do you think about Henry Cavill being officially out of this role going forward, and then also Gunn, like what he said, you know, what do you think you would like to see from his movie? And then also there is potential, it sounds like, for him to even direct this movie. Would you want to see that, or would you more so be open to like the field and seeing like who potentially they could get to do it instead?
I'm excited about this. You know, a year ago, maybe at this point, whenever it was that we did the Zack Snyder's Justice League review, when that came out, that was the first time that I'd seen Batman versus Superman previously, like in theaters, but I had never seen Man of Steel. So like I never really had like that strong connection with Henry Cavill as Superman. Like I thought he was good as Superman. It obviously has the look and the feel of that character. But I've never been connected to that. So this is not like a heartbreaker for me by any means. I would say my loyalty lies more with James Gunn than it does with Henry Cavill as far as track record of success and my appreciation of what they've done. But I will say the thing, like I feel like what makes most of these people, most of the fans upset and also sucks for Henry Cavill is the fact that like my guy was just reintroduced as the character at the end of Black Adam, which was like a month ago, 2 months ago. The fact that he just left The Witcher for maybe other reasons, who knows, but seemingly to get back into like DC as the main priority, and then like all of this is happening. So that's a bummer for him, definitely. But as far as what we're about to get with James Gunn and this new approach, like I think as much as it sucks, like yeah, sure, I know you love Aquaman a lot. You like those movies. Jason Momoa is fantastic as that. Like Jason Momoa is Aquaman. So like that's a loss. I like Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. The second movie wasn't as good, but like still. But when you're trying to just like revamp this whole DC films, DC studios, whatever they're gonna call it, like you gotta just suck it up and rip the Band-Aid off. And I feel like rather than they've been trying to like cobble bits and pieces together for far too long, of trying to like squeeze different things and tie them together and all that. Like you're gonna upset some people. Like Fire James Gunn was trending the other day, but I'm trusting his vision, his process, like you just listed off all of those movies and shows that he's created, and there hasn't been a miss yet. So I feel very confident in what he's going to do. I think that it's very exciting that he's showing that leadership as like taking the first steps to revamp this world by writing the movie himself, making sure that he's doing exactly what he sees fit to like kickstart this thing. We don't know if it's going to be like the first project that comes out under like his new leadership whenever that phase starts, but like it's obviously a top priority. He said that himself. So seeing him making sure that like he's got his fingerprints all over it so he can shape it exactly how he wants, that's exciting. Director wise, like I don't know. I'm interested. Like obviously he's shown his variety of stuff, like from the extreme vulgarity of the Suicide Squad and Peacemaker to more of like the family adventure. Like it's still like silly and adult-ish with like Guardians of the Galaxy, but you know, he's shown a variety of stuff. But I feel like as long as he's writing it, like I'm fine if somebody else directs it. Probably would have the best results if he's the one directing it, but I'm not going to beg for that considering he's going to have so much going on just leading this whole organization. So we'll see what happens there. And selfishly, like I like Peacemaker, I like the Suicide Squad more than I do Superman. So like if we can get him to write this and then put his focus back on the other stuff, like that would be fine by me. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited for starting fresh with this because like I said, I was never particularly connected to Henry Cavill or that iteration of the character. So I'm ready to just start with something new.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. And also there's important to keep in mind, you know, you said we don't know if this is going to be the first movie of the new slate, so to speak. There are still current movies that are going to come out. You know, we have those are definitive. Those are not going to be canceled. They're not going to be thrown on HBO Max. Like these are movies that are going to come out. And then I said this on Twitter. I think my prediction is that this next year, 2023, is going to be the last kind of hurrah for this universe, the DC extended universe, as it's been called. Kind of, it was started almost by the fans and Zack Snyder, and then they actually did name it that for like all intents and purposes. But we'll have, you know, it'll start off next year with Shazam in March, and then we have The Flash in June, I believe, and then it'll have Blue Beetle releasing in August, the first ever Blue Beetle movie. The Flash will be interesting to keep an eye on for many reasons, but of course it was been rumored that Henry Cavill had a cameo in that movie that'll no longer be attached. Gal Gadot is going to have a cameo, and there's that seems to be up in the air. So it'll be curious to see like how that alludes to anything, is if it alludes to like the multiverse or like a status quo change or anything like that, because they have plenty of time to make a change or add stuff to that if they wanted to. And then of course Aquaman in next December, basically a year from now. That'll be maybe the last kind of touch from anything of this Zack Snyder started universe. So and then after that, who knows? I mean, 2024 as of right now looks like just the Joker would be set to come out at this point from DC, which would be in October of 2024. That's obviously a long ways away. I'm thinking maybe they'll leave it like that, and then next year in 2023 and maybe going into 2024, they'll really focus on like the production of some of these other movies and have those ready to start coming out after that. So that'll be interesting.
I'm curious, like obviously all of those that you just listed, like that was like the previous iteration of DC. I know we're getting a Peacemaker season 2, like, and Aquaman has been in Peacemaker, like what's the status of, since that is like literally a James Gunn project, I doubt he's start canceling that or starting over. Like same with like Margot Robbie as the Suicide Squad. How does that factor into all of this? Because those are his movies or his shows.
Yeah, no, I agree that will be interesting to see, because it doesn't seem apparent at this point what
I feel like as much as I love Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn, that's obviously much more tied to, you know, the extended universe rather than a Peacemaker is much more like standalone and can still kind of feel like factor into the new iteration rather than having to start over.
Yeah. No, I agree. So I'm just trying to keep an open mind more than anything. I feel like I trust James Gunn and I trust Peter Safran enough at this point to go forward. And like you said, that it's just kind of like ripping the Band-Aid, like gotta like let some things go to start fresh. And these characters are too big and too important and too iconic to try and pigeonhole them and have them so attached to certain actors or certain filmmakers. I think you just got to let it play out. And it sounds like the other key piece of news that we should all keep an eye on and our ears open for is James Gunn said the slate is quote unquote ready. And so that indicates that they have not just Superman in mind, but potentially other movies and actual projects that they want to move forward with. And he says that those will be announced, all will be revealed essentially early in the new year. So I'm expecting January, maybe after people start to come back from the holidays in Hollywood and everything, that they'll be prepared to release that. And who knows what that's going to look like. Maybe it'll just be James Gunn tweeting about it, maybe have a thread or something, or I imagine it'll also be tied in with their other socials like DC and comics and whatnot, Warner Brothers maybe. Or maybe they'll have like a video that they'll drop. Maybe they'll shoot something and that'll include all the news, or there'll be a press release. I'm sure it'll be interesting to watch how that develops, but I'm just super excited, again, as a lifelong DC fan, to see someone in charge that really I trust and like I know that they are capable, have the knowledge and the capabilities. So I'm just really excited to hear more, even if some of the stuff is a bit of a bummer, at least hearing it for the first time.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the best news of all is that the Matt Reeves Batman universe is completely separate. It's untouched. Nothing's changing there. We are good to go with Pattinson, with just handing the keys to Matt Reeves. So that's very exciting news, because I know anyone who listens to this knows that that's our jam over there. So good news in Gotham.
Yeah.
But moving on to a big week of trailers, we had quite a few splashy trailers show up this week. Across the Spider-Verse got things started online earlier in the week. Obviously a huge hit from 2018 that we both loved. Finally getting this new version, this sequel here. And the trailer was interesting because it wasn't so much as like I would say it's like half and half, because it starts off as just like a scene more so, and then jumps into like a little bit of a sizzle, but it's not like a full-on trailer, I would say. But what were your thoughts here, Johnny? How did we feel about this?
Yeah, I liked it. I wasn't I don't know, blown away. It honestly felt similar to what we had gotten previously, which was like, what, a year? Like, was that earlier this year or maybe even last year? Where we got
it
kind
just
of,
shows like a bunch of different Spider-Man. Like basically
yeah.
like what we get is like the intimate scene between Miles and his mom,
Mhm.
talking about like, and then that voiceover carries throughout the trailer, but she's basically just talking about like not like always being there to protect him, wanting to make sure that the people he surrounds himself with are loving him and taking care of him and looking out for him as well. And we get like flashes. A lot of this trailer was footage from the first movie, which felt kind of weird.
Yeah.
But a lot of like flashes of, you know, Spider-Gwen and Peter Parker and the crew from that first movie, and then it goes into and then then it goes into more of like the new stuff, and we see like uh Oscar Isaac's
Yeah.
new character and a bunch of
Spider-Man
different yeah,
2099.
a bunch of different versions of the Spider-Verse, because they go in and it's like the prompt, like the plot, it seems to be is like they have released an official plot, but it's basically like it seems like there are some bad Spider-Man in here that are like that everybody else is gonna have to like figure out what to do with and like preserve the security of the Spider-Verse.
Mhm.
But as far as animation goes, like I thought it looked great. I thought it had that same flair of the first movie. Very excited for this. Just wasn't like a true big exciting trailer, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree. It was a little underwhelming, but I'm still excited for the movie. What they showed of the new footage looked pretty good. It was just a strange like trailer, I think, as far as like the concept and like the way it was executed. So, but looking forward to that. It's a little ways away. It's in summertime. And speaking of summertime, these other trailers that we have on the horizon and that came out are also all in that same wild couple months that are going to be June and July of 2023. And I think the one that probably got the most buzz and attention of anything was the brief, but I feel like almost like instantly iconic Barbie teaser, which was only an in theater exclusive for like Thursday, like opening night of Avatar, and then of course like leaked online and was pirated, and then they were like, oh, we're gonna release it online like Friday, and so then it came out Friday after a lot of people had already seen like bits and pieces, and it's very short as well, only about a minute and a half, if not shorter, and so the coolest thing about this in some ways was it's like almost like a special kind of made for the trailer
Right.
sequence.
I was curious if this was going to be in the movie, because it very much seemed like it was just the trailer, like just the
Yeah.
teaser.
No, I definitely seems like something that's just for the teaser. I don't see any way that this makes sense as being in the movie. But it is another Warner Brothers film that they take inspiration from. It's Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. The kind of the birth of the Barbie, like the new doll to take over from what all these girls growing up decades ago only had little baby dolls to play with, is the joke that they're kind of getting to here.
Mhm.
um and it takes like it goes like frame for frame almost like from parts of 2001. So I thought that was really funny. I thought it was a great comparison to make, and not only that, but the actual brief snippets of footage that we got for the Barbie movie also looked
Production design off the charts.
really cool.
Yeah, this I know we saw a little bit of the Goss God. We saw Simu Liu. Who else did we see? Obviously Margot Robbie. I feel like there was
Yes,
somebody else.
there is a, let's see here.
I'm dropping the ball here. I'm curious. I'm thinking back. Maybe I could see this being like this part being like literally the start of the movie. Um,
Yeah,
as like an introduction, almost like back in Birds of Prey, where we had like the Harley Quinn like backstory, like
yeah.
intro, and then it went into like the real movie. Not to say that that's just because this is another Margot Robbie movie. Um, but no, this looked awesome. I was very excited by it. I was upset because I did not get this in my Avatar The Way of Water. Like, so I saw Avatar on Monday of last week at
Yeah.
like a critics only screening, which was in Dolby 3D, and that those don't have previews. And so then I had already previously, before I knew about the screening, I had already gotten a ticket for opening night in IMAX. And so I was like, first of all, I'm going to go see this again just because I like this movie. But also, that means I get to see Barbie and Oppenheimer on the big screen because people have been hyping that up. And neither of those happened for me, Johnny. So unless you have anything else on Barbie, tell me all about Oppenheimer.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention real quick with Barbie. Again, there's only a few short shots, most of it focusing on Margot Robbie, but Ken, with Ryan Gosling as Ken, looked very funny. And then in that same shot, like little sequence, there's also Kingsley Benadir, who some people will know. He played Malcolm X,
Malcolm X.
One Night in Miami. And then there's also, of course, the new Doctor Who and Kuti Gatwa. He was also in that shot. And then we also got, you mentioned Simu Liu. He had a shot to himself, and then Issa Rae was also in one of the other brief snippets we got.
Who is also Spider-Woman and Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes.
I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, so she's gonna have a big year. But this definitely looks like it's going to be a huge hit. I think that everyone's liking what they're seeing so far, and they're really leaning into the Barbiness of it all. So I like that quite a bit. But as far as Oppenheimer is concerned, so you didn't see anything from Oppenheimer?
No, I was shocked.
Oh.
I kept waiting. Like we had the Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, like, which was again one that was like going into it. It was like, you're gonna see Barbie, you're gonna see Oppenheimer, you're gonna see Mission Impossible, like IMAX first look. And so like we got the Mission Impossible, and I was like, okay, yes, it seems like we're getting all of these, which we can talk about that as well. We also had a Creed 3 like behind the scenes IMAX special, which was awesome. Love those movies. But nothing Oppenheimer whatsoever. I was so bummed.
Yeah, no, that is a bummer. I'm bummed for you. I didn't get Barbie either the two times I've seen Avatar so far, so I don't know what's going on with that. But I did see the Creed 3 IMAX featurette which was very cool. But I've seen two Oppenheimer previews now. The first one was in IMAX when I saw Avatar, and then the second one, which was a completely different preview, was when I saw it in Dolby just last night. And so with IMAX, it was a full-blown, like full IMAX aspect ratio, filled the entire screen, top and bottom, exclusive preview, where it was basically just introducing Oppenheimer as like as a character. Matt Damon, who plays like a military officer, he's kind of sitting down and meeting with Oppenheimer for the first time. And then it goes into like this montage of basically them preparing to the bomb and preparing the test site. Oppenheimer kind of talking to several different people to try to kind of grapple with the like magnitude of what they're trying to do and what the potential outcomes could be. And it just kind of makes it very like sets the stakes very high. The photography was like really the highlight because they just got some really cool shots of the desert, and there's a few different inserts of like what it looks like nuclear reactions and like explosions basically. Which looked very, again, Nolan was bragging about this, I think just last week, where he was saying that, they did it without CGI and like all these other things, which I'll be curious to hear more about exactly how they went and did that. But it looked very, very cool. It was obviously huge in IMAX, and the colors were popping. And it just looks very epic and like very big scale. We didn't get anything with Florence Pugh, which I was a little surprised by. I would think that someone like of her star power at this point would have gotten at least a shot in there. We got to see Emily Blunt though. Matt Damon, like I said, was a big part of it, but Cillian Murphy is obviously like the star of the show, and there were some great close-ups with him, and he looks very he looks very pensive and like very intense. So I'm curious to see what he does finally having his own kind of big budget starring vehicle. I'm really excited to see him get that opportunity. So and then it closed out with a shot as they were getting ready. The whole last half of this trailer is basically a countdown of the bomb preparing to go off. And then it cuts to Robert Downey Jr. making an appearance, who he's almost unrecognizable. He certainly is a far cry from like what we saw of him as Tony Stark in recent years. But he's playing this person called Louis Strauss. And I think he's kind of someone who's just part of a commission to almost like interrogate Oppenheimer and kind of get to the bottom and critique like what he did or what's going on. So that'll be interesting. But the other one that I saw in Dolby was definitely a much more straightforward preview. I think it actually had like the 4 like audiences and like that sort of thing, like the green band on it. And that one was like more of like a less dark or like less intense preview. It was more about, kind of just showing more of like the characters and more of kind of the science behind the bomb, and kind of just getting into like it was a little weird, like the tone of it. I wasn't really sure. I definitely preferred the IMAX one. I'm curious to see when this other preview I saw will go online, the Dolby one, because it didn't seem to be like a theater exclusive. It definitely seems like something that would be released. And we got a poster last week for Oppenheimer, but we didn't get anything put online like we did with Barbie or Spider-Verse. So maybe we'll get it online this week. That's just speculation, but keep an eye out for it because it does seem like something that would be out sooner, like rather than later. Yeah, but ultimately, Oppenheimer, like I'm excited for it. Neither of these previews like blew me away. I thought they were still very cool. But I'm just a little curious to see like what this movie ultimately looks like from like a story, like kind of telling standpoint, like how they go about depicting everything that went into the creation of the atom bomb and kind of the repercussions of all that. So there's a lot that they have opportunities to do with it. It's just a matter of what Nolan chooses to focus on. But yeah,
I'm excited for it as well. Not having seen the trailer, or I've seen like that initial teaser, but nothing that was like new. But I will say I'm excited for it. But I love like Christopher Nolan wise, like I love Interstellar, Inception, the Batman movies. Tenet was I love like I enjoyed Tenet, but I didn't love it. What else? The Prestige.
Yeah.
But I like Dunkirk as well, but Dunkirk is definitely probably like my lowest one, but it's still like a 3.5 or 4. I know you and Jake are going to be on me for that. But all of that being said, like with the exception of Dunkirk, I feel like there's like he obviously has like a sci-fi lean, so I'm curious to see like the approach here, like how much I enjoyed this one not being like a typical Christopher Nolan movie, if you will, if there is such a thing, but not, being such a diversion based on like a true story. So I'm excited, but also slightly nervous just because that's not because of a him thing. It's like I was saying earlier about the kind of movies that I am into, that it might be a me thing here, unfortunately, but we'll see. However, final trailer, teaser, whatever you want to call it, behind the scenes. We don't have to go too far in depth to it because this is like, we've seen Tom Cruise ride off this mountain for years, like literally a year at this point. Like there were news stories about it. There were clips online. We've seen pretty much like this behind the scenes. Like this was maybe like a couple added like 30 seconds to what we had previously seen already of like Tom Cruise. Cause this released online with most of the same footage prior. But if you're not fired up for a Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning next year, then you should probably not be listening to this podcast.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Dead Reckoning feature, you said you actually got to see. This was the one thing you got to see, it sounds like.
Yes.
But for me, I think this was the coolest, most like gripping thing that I saw the past week, even more than the Oppenheimer preview or Barbie or Spider-Verse. As cool as Barbie and those other things were, I mean, this gave me like legit goosebumps, like seeing it like in the theater. And the craziest thing is, as you already mentioned, we've seen this. I mean, we've seen it in the movie. Like the trailer has the actual movie footage of him jumping off the cliff.
Right.
Which I still love that trailer and I think it's great. But this is like just 4 minutes, just showing you the ins and outs of how they set it up and like the stakes and everything, and Tom Cruise preparing and Chris McQuarrie, getting ready to shoot it. And then it's like you can't believe it. Like even though they do it and you see him do it a couple different times, like, and you see the height and you see the skill and like the speed and everything, it's always like shocking to me. And you can't really get that from anything, because the biggest thing is that it's real. Like it's not just some CG thing they put in the movie. It's not some stunt man taking something. It's not, he's not on wires. I mean, this is life and death. You can do all the training in the world, but if something goes wrong, I mean, that's, it could be death. So it's not like I'm encouraging that, or like I think that that's what you need to do to make a movie like this, but there's just something about it that's just so different and so unique. And no other movie series, at least, or franchise, or like really other action movies I've seen, in recent years, at least, has like elicited that same feeling in me, I feel like. And so I just can't wait. I know it's still a ways away. It's going to be July, just at the same time, basically, as Barbie and Oppenheimer. But if I had to pick one to watch out of all three of them, I think I'd go with this, honestly.
Yes.
As a huge fan of the series, as a huge fan, knowing that this is probably going to be the last couple movies that we're going to get from it. I'm very much invested in the characters. I want to see how it wraps up, and I want to see what crazy stuff they get into other than this one scene that they've really kind of highlighted, obviously.
Yeah, I will say we were talking about it in our group chat. Curious to see what the like logic for this scene in the movie is, because it's insanely impressive, but it literally looks like a roller coaster was built on the side of a mountain, this ramp. And I think Jake had said, like, Ethan, the Russians have built a giant ramp on the side of this mountain and you have to drive down. Like, what is the logical premise
in the
going to be?
movie, in the movie, there's not going to be the ramp.
Right. I know. So it's so I guess I imagine it's just like the mountainside that he's driving off of, but it looks wild. I'm very excited for it. But what also looked wild, there's my segue, was Avatar: The Way of Water. Johnny, let's get down to business here. All right, 13 years in the making. It's Avatar: The Way of Water. It's been a long ride since 2009. But Johnny, was it a great ride? Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I know there's so much to be said about this movie. I know we want to get right down to it. So before we start sharing any of the stuff, let me get the concrete details out here. Sam Worthington, Zoe Saldana, Sigourney Weaver, Stephen Lang, Kate Winslet, Britton Dalton, Jamie Flatters, Bailey Bass, Jack Champion, and Trinity Jolie Bliss. That's your cast here. Obviously directed by James Cameron, making a comeback from 2009's Avatar. Currently sitting at a 78% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, 94% audience score. And I'm coming in hot with a 95 out of 100. I watched this the first time, was a 4.5 out of 5. I think I had it at a 92. Watched it the second time, confirmed it was not just all hype from that first initial screening. Bumped it up to 5 stars, 95 out of 100 for me. Johnny, how are we looking here?
I'm not quite as high as you. I'd say I'm like right around 85, 90 out of 100, but it's very much a strong.
We'll take it. We'll take it.
4.5 out of 5 at least.
Amazing. I love it. Can't wait to talk about it. So the plot here, this is one thing about this movie. Obviously, it's 3 hours long, 3+ hours. And it's kind of, like, one thing that's so interesting about it is that, like, there obviously are things that happen that, but there's no like spoil in the sense of like a Marvel movie or something. There's no like spoilers of like a lot of stuff just like unfolds and happens. And like, I don't know if I'm doing this justice in the way I'm describing it, but it's hard to spoil this movie. So maybe we will, maybe we won't. I'm sorry. But the general plot here, set more than a decade after the events of the first film, Avatar: The Way of Water begins to tell the story of the Sully family, Jake and Neytiri and their kids, the trouble that follows them, the lengths they go to keep each other safe, the battles they fight to stay alive, and the tragedies they endure. So that's a very, like, you know, bird's eye view of it. The more in-depth summary is essentially life is good on Pandora. You know, at the end of the first movie, Jake fully became his avatar, his Na'vi counterpart, is the leader of the forest tribe of people and is living life. We start this movie off with like a very peaceful recap of him and Neytiri's life. They've got children now, 2 boys of their own, an adopted daughter, Kiri, that came from Grace's avatar, and no father known, like big mystery there, which I'll talk about that later. But so 2 boys, Kiri, they have their own daughter, Took. They've got Spider, who's like sort of an adopted child that was left by the Sky People. But life is good. The Forest Clan is thriving, and then one night the Sky People return. The humans come back. This time they are not just mining for resources and sending back to Earth. Earth is dying. They have full intentions of coming here and staying and taking over this planet. And in order to do so, they have to put down the resurgence, the Na'vi people, and that means taking out Jake Sully. He's public enemy number 1. And so the war is back on. But once Jake learns that they are hunting him specifically in order to help save his clan and his family, they decide to up and move from the forest and go to the far reaches of of the planet of Pandora to the reef tribes, the reef clans with the Metcaina. And so that's where we get this whole new world. Obviously, it's called the Way of Water. We came here to see James Cameron get wet. And that's what happens here once they leave the forest tribes. So that's where I'll leave the plot for now. Oh, I guess I have to throw in there, obviously, that the leader of this this return from the Sky People is Colonel Miles Quaritch, who died in the first movie. His human form died, played by Stephen Lang. But instead, we learn in a great exposition scene. I don't know if you felt the same way. But prior to that final battle in Avatar 2009, the company basically took all of his grunts, their consciousness, and downloaded it, saved it. So they know everything, all of the memories, all of their life experiences, everything they know prior to that battle, and uploaded it into Na'vi avatar bodies. So we get a big blue man version of Quaritch and his crew. And so they're out for revenge, trying to fulfill this mission and also get revenge on Jake and Neytiri for killing them in the first movie. So very exciting. The beef between them I thought it was a very cool way of bringing this character back. Like I said, the exposition was cool. We get like a video diary like we saw in the first movie of human Quaritch explaining like, I'm not going to lose this battle, so there's no need for this, but if it does go wrong, like this is why you're here. Obviously it did go wrong, but bringing that character back was a massive win, I think, in creating a dynamic villain that has history rather than trying to create something new. But that's where I'll leave the plot for now. Johnny, let's get into it. What are your overall thoughts on this movie?
Yeah, you said a lot of good stuff there, especially about the villain, who we'll probably discuss more here in a second. I just really, I was excited for it. I'm a big fan of the original more than probably the vast majority of people. And I would say this movie is just as good and in a lot of ways better than the first one. It delivered pretty much everything I was looking for, and like in certain things it delivered even more. Like, for example, you were just talking about Quaritch. I knew, well, before the initial trailers came out this year, going back to like April or May, I think, when the first one came out, I did not know or expect that he would come back. Like, I wasn't sure what would be going on as far as like a villain was concerned. Once we saw that he was going to not only come back, but come back as an avatar, I was very curious to see how they would play that. How do you avoid making it redundant? And I thought they added like so much like humanity to him and like depth, and, like shades of gray. Then, in the first one, he's almost like a cartoon villain. And I don't say that in like a negative way. I think he's a cartoon, and like he is just like a 100% like hater, and like, he is going to do anything.
The military grunt that just wants to like complete the mission and kick ass and doesn't care. Yeah,
exactly. And I think there's a lot of great qualities in having like a very dynamic, like anti-hero, like sympathetic villain. But I also think there's a lot to be said for just a great villain who you love to hate. And I think that he was a good example of that. But in this one, I genuinely did find myself like feeling for him, and like loving how they did add those wrinkles to his character. And I think that's just one small example of ways that this movie built on what came before, while also adding a lot of like introducing even new concepts and like brand new ideas and fun kind of nuances to things that I wasn't really anticipating. We mentioned that there's this kid who is a human who's kind of taken in as like a foster kid almost by Sully and Neytiri. So I'm not going to try to spoil anything, but that his character Spider, which is what they call him in the movie, I wasn't really sure like what to expect from that character. And honestly, I couldn't get a finger on like what he was supposed to do like in this movie, or like how they were going to incorporate that. In some regards,
I think it's okay to that. I feel like that's addressed pretty early on in the movie. If we want to discuss it, I think it's okay.
Yeah. So certain things I'll say is like that character, he's basically, like I said, he's like a foster kid of like Neytiri and Jake. But he was left behind, and he wears a mask like to go out and explore in the world. But he thinks and feels like he is basically a Na'vi. Like he doesn't identify with humans, nearly as much, if at all. And so I wasn't sure though. My main thing is I wasn't sure how I would feel about having a human, like especially like a kid character interacting and dealing with all these other characters and like being part of this world. Like I wasn't sure if that was going to mesh so well. But I thought the way that they did decide to incorporate that character in the movie and ultimately like where that character goes kind of like through his like emotional journey. Again, I thought that was just something that made sense ultimately. And like that was one of the items that just like won me over, even though I had been nervous about it. And I think the kids in general, and I talked about this a little on Twitter, but like I think the kids in general were one of the things I was maybe most concerned about going into the movie and then came out feeling like the most positive about.
Yeah.
And I think you felt similarly about that.
No, I definitely do. Going back to just like the beginning of this, I guess, before I get into the kids, just this, I know you were just saying that you were like probably a bigger fan of the original than most people, even though like a lot of people saw it, a lot of people loved it, a lot of people kind of forgot about it, and I was definitely in that camp. There's always been the articles written, the think pieces of like the biggest movie of all time that left zero cultural impact, all of that. Like obviously the first movie broke all the box office records. It set a new precedent for visual effects in movies, a game changer there. But it is like a lot of people don't necessarily like remember it or think about it, talk about it in like favorite movies or like, you know, best movies of like just in like the common pop culture. And I was like very much for the longest time like in that camp of like, yeah, like Avatar was good, but like I don't care about it whatsoever. And then like as we got closer and closer to the release of the second one, like obviously the hype began to build again. We talked about a couple months ago like the re-release of the first one in September, being very impressed with that again. But I will say that my issues with the first one have always been like the glitz and glam of it all, but not necessarily like the beef, the meat and potatoes of the storyline. That it was all mainly like flash without as much substance. But going into this movie, I wasn't excited for it as a fan of Avatar. I was more just like curious about it and like the water elements and the filming and the all of that. But going into it the second time, I was like, I'm a huge Avatar fan now, because like this movie blew me away. I know you said it was comparable to the first one. For me, like I think this movie like supersedes the first one in every possible way. And has made me not only like a fan of like James Cameron's like technical filmmaking in the Avatar world and seeing those things, but like a huge fan of the characters and the relationships and the world and all of the narrative elements here too. Because I think that like you were talking about with the characters, and we'll get into it, of like the storyline here, what I was saying of the first movie, like was absolutely not the case in The Way of Water. I think that they did an excellent job of creating these compelling storylines, creating the characters that over the course of 3 hours, like there are a lot of characters, but all of them serve a purpose. All of them grow significantly and like you get to know them. I feel like with the family dynamic being such an important thing in this movie, like in order to make that hit, you have to spend time with them. And so like a lot of the movie's kind of split up into like 3 sections of like the first act is like the reacclimation and then like the setup of the plot setup of the antagonist, and then the second act is kind of like we're just hanging out in underwater and exploring and like getting to know this side of Pandora and getting to know the characters and watching them grow. And then the third act is the climax and the finale. But so like that second part, like it may sound based on that description that like the second part is not as exciting as the rest, but I thought it was just as thrilling and just as engaging to watch these characters and get to know them better and get to spend that time. That's really where the technological side of like the underwater filming and stuff like really shines during that segment. But now circling all the way back to the kids, sorry for that segue, that rant. But no, I thought the kids were fantastic. I really enjoyed the story, like their performances. I thought Spider was great. I really liked the storyline. It seemed like you were kind of hesitant to say it, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it just so we can talk about it. Of like the fact that Spider was, like you said, was left behind by the Sky People, and he was Quaritch's son. So not alluded to there in the first movie. There was no mention of him whatsoever. But basically, when the people got kicked off, the humans got kicked off the planet. He was too young. You can't put a baby in cryo to send back to Earth. So he grew up being Na'vi, ashamed of who his father was. And so he doesn't know. Quaritch, when he comes back, doesn't know that his son is still around. They kind of meet early, and then it's explained probably within like the first 20 minutes by Spider that his father was Quaritch, and then like we get to see them together, and it's a very interesting dynamic. But this movie is very much like a movie about fathers and sons, because we've got that dynamic between those two. We've got the dynamic between Loic, who's the younger son of Jake Sully, and Nataeum, who's the older son. Both of those have like different dynamics. The older brother, Nataeum, is very much like Jake is hard on him to be a leader, to look out for his family, to like be responsible. And then at the same time, Loic is he's very hard on Loic, because I think they're honestly very similar in like their recklessness and leading each other into battle, and like trying to always like be a hero. But it's very much Loic trying to grapple with like who his father is, being Toruk Makto, being the leader of the Avatar of the Na'vi people, and him trying to like constantly impress him and live up to the hype and earn his validation. And then at the same time, you've got not to as much like as big of an extent, but Kiri and her mother, like they're still in a tank. Like Grace's avatar is like, it looks like she's maybe on like life support or something. I don't know what the status is, because they're keeping her around for some reason. But also like the non-fatherhood there of like nobody. I have a theory that she was like born of Awa. I feel like that's kind of hinted at, that like it was like a Virgin Mary kind of conception of like the plant, like Grace was impregnated by Awa's spirit or the planet or something like that, because there's obviously like a big connection between Kiri and Awa. But no, all of that to say, like that is a big part of like the emotional storytelling, the narrative here of like this overarching theme of like parents and children, that helps make a lot of this movie work, where I had issues with the first movie. And a lot of the emotional moments in the climax work because of the time that is spent setting up these relationships.
No, absolutely. I think that, the movie has like kind of really three main sections. You have the first section where you're just getting back into the world. You're getting caught up on what's happened as far as, Jake's life is concerned, his life with Neytiri, their family growing, and then also just kind of the status quo with, the human presence on the planet, or the lack thereof, and then the return of the Sky People. And then really it's a matter of what happens that causes this initial conflict, like kind of the hook of the story. And then you have really the middle chunk, which is getting into the sea, the sea environment and like the underwater world of Pandora, which is again kind of like the focal point of the movie. And that is also great. It's like that environment and that change of like lifestyle is such a great vehicle to learn about these new characters, the children, because you get to learn all about their personalities, how they interact with each other, but also how they interact and like perform under stress and like with like new people that they have to like learn to work.
The whole other like the Metcaina children as well. Seeing them like kind of in this almost like high school dynamic of trying to like fit in and make friends.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that like James Cameron, you can say what you want about his like writing, about his, screenplays, his dialogue, whatever. I'm not going to say that he's Billy Wilder or anything, or Aaron Sorkin, but like when it comes to like he's so fundamentally sound, I think, when it comes to like character and story and thematics. Like I think he just nails those like down so well, even if they can be like a little like a bit, if you want to call it like on the more like basic or like simplistic side. But I think honestly there is so much like rich material going on, and like I did get attached to like the kids, and like I think kids are so hard to pull off in movies like so much of the time, but especially like given the mocap, given like how dense like the dialogue can be at times, or like the world and like kind of what they have to navigate. I thought that all the children like gave such great performances, and I thought that Cameron did such a great job directing them, like bringing them to life, and making them
Mhm.
like unique, and also having like good banter and like back and forth with one another. But also like not only with each other, but like the overall like family dynamic. So like their relationships with, Jake, and then also Neytiri, and the other children, as you mentioned. So that all works. And then also like ultimately the third like section of this movie is more so like getting back into like the central conflict. The middle chunk of the movie is almost like, I've seen multiple people say this, it's kind of like the best, like most immersive, gorgeous, like nature documentary like ever. It's almost like a Nat Geo kind of situation
Right.
where you are really just getting to experience this world through the eyes of these characters. So it allows you to, again, get in tune with each of them and get to know them, but also get to fall in love with like this environment and this world, this ecosystem, and like care about it. And then that also informs kind of your emotions and how engaged you are going into the final stretch of the movie, which is some of the best, most like geographically sound, most crystal clear, most jaw dropping, like edge of your seat, sustained action like I've seen in years in a Hollywood movie. I mean, compare this to any of the MCU movies, over the last 10 years since Avatar came out. Compare it to, the DC movies for that matter. Compare it to the Star Wars movies from Disney.
Mhm.
I mean, I think this blows them all away, and by and
For
large for the
sure.
action. And then not only the action, but also the technical and computer ingenuity and that comes into actually bringing the action to life and staging it and realizing it. I think it just all works to perfection. Also, you get the big emotional highs and lows and payoffs that you want to get after 3 hours, and also it leaves
Mhm.
you, for me, and just kind of wrap up at least like as far as my feelings on the story, like I finished this movie so glad that I know we only have to wait a couple years, not 13 years for the next one, because I
Yes.
really want to see what happens next. And like, I want to see more of these characters. I want to spend more time with them. I want to see more of Pandora. And I think that that's just all testament to just how great a job Cameron did, just recentering the audience and carrying them through this journey, over the 3 hours.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. I absolutely can't wait for Avatar 3 at this point. And the fact that they filmed them back to back, wonderful. Also very helpful for, I would imagine, the consistency of the children. Well, I would say that, but also like we had Sigourney Weaver playing like a 15-year-old, or like I don't know how old she was supposed to be, but like a teenager.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if these kids are 25, they can still mocap and play their 6-year-old self for Took if they need to. Um, but no, I agree with you 100%. The second act, like the nature documentary part, like one of the things we haven't really touched on is like the whole um the poaching element and the tulkun, the whales. I loved that part.
Yeah.
I thought that was huge in seeing Loic's development. The younger son, when he's bonding with this outcast, they obviously have like the connected sentiment. We learn that the people, the Metcaina people, like have like sister spirits with these whales, or brother spirits, I guess. And they can communicate and stuff. It's not just like a, a human and a regular, like a real whale. But there's like that spiritual element between them. And so seeing like Loic and um his Tulkun communicate and bond over like their sort of like outcastness, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Obviously beautiful to just like see the relationship between them and the visuals, as the iconic image that's been used in a lot of the marketing of like the arm stretching out and touching the fin, but also like the whole poaching part where we see the humans that are hunting down these creatures and killing them in very brutal ways. And like I guess it's like their brain matter or something that
Yeah.
they're harvesting and selling for 80 million a jar, for like a tiny sample. and then just like wasting the rest. That was one of the things that Spider questions of like, is that all you're taking? Like you're wasting the rest. But that was a super cool, obviously, like James Cameron is super dedicated to the ocean, loves sea life. So to see him like organically work that in there, I feel like one of the things that was really impressive is that like there's obviously like very powerful underlying messages there, but nothing ever felt preachy or like like it was forced in there rather than like serving the plot, because I think it all worked really well. And what was I was gonna say something else about the poor Tulkun. But I don't remember what it was, so I'll
Was
just
it
pass it back to.
some things that happened maybe in the last 30 or 45?
Oh, the justice of the Tulkun was wonderful. Seeing that scene, but I can't remember what else I was gonna say. I'm sorry. I'll pass it back over to you.
No, I mean, I definitely want to echo that. I mean, you know, we were talking about the characters, the Navi characters, the children getting into kind of the just getting centered with them and aligning our kind of perspective with them, getting to know them as individuals. And I think, you know, to your point, Cameron also made it a focus of getting to know the environment, but also the animals that come with that environment. So the whales, but also, you know, the I'm not sure if I caught the name or like what they were.
I looked it up. They're the elu. It's like the sea version of the Ikrons that they fly on.
Yeah, so those were key, and then also the other fish they would ride, like
the like flying
fish
version.
Yeah, that was very cool.
The skim wings.
Skim wing, that's right. So all these new animals, like you really like kind of get quickly up to speed with like what they do, how they function, their personalities, and that sort of thing. So that was nice to get some like diversification as far as like the creatures, because the Ikran, like those were very much the focus of the first movie, and that was really like the main vehicle. It was the main like attack like kind of
right
creature that they used. Where in this we are getting like different species, we're getting different types of animals. So I thought that was a cool way to kind of expand on that. And so yes. I'm looking forward to that. Also, Neytiri like gets to like continue to use her Ikran, so that was in there.
It was very cool seeing like the unique, like the adaptation of like these. I'm sure that like I don't know what the biology of Pandora is, but like it seems like okay, we obviously see it with the Navi of like the reef people have different anatomy than the forest people. So like they have thicker tails, they have like kind of fins on their forearms. So it was cool seeing like those unique adaptations, but then like I would imagine that like the Ikran and the Elu stem from the same creature and then like kind of branched off at some point in like Pandora history. But it was cool to see like something that serves the same purpose but is unique to like this new environment. But I did remember what I was going to say earlier about like there's a moment in the third act that that brought tears to my eyes, but then there's also the during the poaching scene where they hunt down the mother of the, like that had me like welling up as well, which I was very surprised. But it's like incredibly emotional storytelling with a creature that doesn't talk, doesn't have like up until that point. Like you later learn that there's more of a connection, but when it happens, you know, you're not necessarily like, it's not like it was Loax Tulkun that you'd been spending time with and like getting to know, but it was still like equally affecting.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the last like again 45 minutes or hour of this movie is just kind of a gauntlet, like emotionally and like action wise and everything else. When I went last night with my family, my sister-in-law was like literally like crying like maybe the last like 45 minutes of the movie straight, like as we were walking out. It was just, and that was definitely like more so how I was feeling, especially the first time I saw it. It was just like kind of overwhelmed, and it's like you're kind of almost lulled into like a sense of like security in a way, almost just like the characters are. And so when things kind of hit the fan, and we go into that last stretch with the final scenes and the final kind of climactic moments, it definitely hits, I think. and, everyone's mileage will vary, but for me, again, it led into that point of me feeling like, okay, that was really satisfying, but also like there's unfinished business, and I definitely want to see the next story and the next steps that these characters are going to take.
Yeah. It's and it's interesting because we've obviously like talked a lot about like the emotional part of it, but it's also like a really fun, like just a very fun movie, and it has very funny moments too of like, it's cool to see like something that is so alien but also feels very human and familiar, and that's obviously like the Jake Sully influence. Like at the very beginning when we're getting that recap of his life, like he's talking about like date night, which
Yeah.
is like such a human concept, but it's like we're seeing it in this world that is so foreign. And then
Yeah.
like you see like Loic, one of the things that he gets made fun of is like because he has four fingers, but then that means he also has a middle finger, so he like uses the middle finger, flips off somebody. But it has like we get like father son jokes between like Jake and Nateum when he's asking like what did the other guy look like
Yeah.
yes, it's very emotional, but also there are these like humorous moments, and then there's also like these huge action set pieces that are thrilling and like you said earlier, like better than any blockbuster, any Marvel movie, any
Yeah.
DC movie. That's like it's so exciting but also so depressing to be like, why can't everything else look like this that we are seeing? Because that third act is spectacular. Everything about it, the action, the set piece, the visual effects, like everything is just amazing.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, yeah, it is a bummer. Like that was one of the things actually that my family, like my brother and his wife were saying coming out of it, was like, they couldn't wrap their heads around how they did everything they did, or like understand like how they did certain things like with the effects and whatnot. And they're just like, why? Like, I don't understand. There's no excuse like why other movies aren't aiming with all the money that goes into them, with all the time that goes into them, why are they not aiming for like better everything, really? I mean, not only the effects, which are, obviously these are all-time great effects, but just, just the storytelling and like the stakes and everything. James Cameron, you can knock him for a lot of things, you can knock Avatar for a lot of things, but it is a well-told story, and it is a well-made movie from like every technical angle you could think of. And I think that taking the time to make a universe and not only do that but build up characters and like build up a larger narrative, I think pays off. And of course, that's not to say, the MCU, we saw them do that like over their shared universe, but I think certainly we've been more critical of it in the last few years as they've gone, past Endgame and whatnot, and past
Right.
this new multiversal saga. I think I'm very satisfied with this, but it also makes you think like outside of James Cameron, outside of Avatar, like we should be expecting more from these big blockbuster movies, and like things that should be epic and they're aiming to be epic should actually achieve that. And I think that this is one of those movies that does. And I feel like there's so many other movies, a lot of comparisons to be made. I'm sure James Cameron, I've said this before, I think he's absolutely taken inspiration from this. But Dune, for example, last year, a big sci-fi epic saga about family and nature and the environment. I think I'm just so like grateful and glad that we get these types of movies. We're going to get them kind of back to back, like subsequent years. We have Dune Part 2 next year, and then Avatar 3 the year after that. I'm just really glad, especially as a sci-fi kind of junkie, that we have Villeneuve, we have Cameron giving us these great kind of stories and epic, like genuinely awe-inspiring, not only with the effects but just also like the themes and like the characters and the storytelling.
Right. And
yeah,
I was thinking of like a Dune comparison earlier, but that'll lead me into this final question that I want to talk about, this last segment of like, I think something that's so cool about this movie is that like I've seen some people say that like, oh, there are too many characters, like I don't know their names, like I don't like too many kids, too many like different, then there's like the other tribe, whatever. Like I didn't have an issue with that. I thought they all, with the exception of maybe like Kate Winslet's character, that felt maybe she'll have a bigger part moving forward.
yeah,
But I feel like she did not have much to do, unfortunately, which is like, she's a huge name to have in here. Like that seemed like underutilized, but
yeah,
with like all of these different characters, it seems very set up. Like if this goes to full like Avatar 5, like I'm not expecting Jake Sully to be around for all of them,
Yeah.
or maybe not Neytiri. Like it's very primed for like the passing on of like the next generation and like carrying this similar. Like I haven't read all of the Dune books, but like from my understanding of like I've read the first two, I've seen the movie, like I know that carries on like way past like Paul Atreides and like moves forward into like
Yeah.
that work. Like I feel like we could move forward with like Jake Sully's children and like the next generation of Na'vi. So that leads me to in Avatar. I'm not expecting that immediately in Avatar 3, but where do you want to go from here? We leave off with Jake Sully's like offering for his family to leave again because they have brought this battle to the Reef tribe, and they're like, no, you're a part of us now. So it doesn't sound like they're hitting the road. It sounds like we're gonna stick around with the Metcaina and like be in this environment further. But we have Quaritch, who is still in play. We as a villain, maybe a reformed villain, who knows? Like the humans are still here trying to settle on this planet. Do you have any? I don't think anybody has any like idea of where it's going. Do you have any desires of where you'd like to see this go moving forward into the third movie and beyond?
Well, there have been some. I mean, Cameron's alluded to, if this movie didn't do well, which is not going to happen, it's going to do well.
Right, that it could be wrapped up in a trilogy rather than
Could be
5
wrapped up in a
movies.
trilogy, but I think they are going to go at least 4, probably 5. I think they'll just do the 5 and call it a day, most likely. But I think there's a couple things he's alluded to that I think would be super interesting. One of them, he said that there would be a scene, or we'd see some. I don't know if it would be in chronological order, if this would be a flashback, or how this would make sense in context. But he said there would be scenes on Earth, and we would get to see more of Earth potentially.
Interesting.
I don't know if that means, again, it could be flashbacks, could be backstory, or could we see the Na'vi potentially go to Earth and do something? I think there's also a mention that or maybe an allusion to this. I don't know a direct quote, but that potentially Cameron would play with the idea that not all the Na'vi are good, quote unquote, and that they may have their own motives. And maybe that ties into the Earth, aspect, where maybe some bad Na'vi, get the power, get the control to take the fight to Earth and wanted like settle it with the humans like once and for all. Like that would be an unreal, I think, like final 5th movie kind of battle. That would be like just,
I mean, that's definitely a way to keep things fresh and not just recycle, this movie recycled the first movie by any means, but like the way that like this movie was so different from the first movie. I'm looking to see like how can Avatar 3 continue to be so different, because we know 2 and 3 were filmed back to back. If they are staying with the Metcaina, I'm expecting, like, since they were filmed back to back, that it's probably a lot of the same like water stuff. Like we're already in the tank, we're gonna go ahead and knock it out. So I'm interested to see like how, I have full faith that it will be, but I'm interested to just see like how different it can be, what direction they choose to take it in.
Yeah, I agree. I think the last thing I would say is that would be very interesting. That'd be very unique. I think it'd be a kind of almost like a fitting kind of poetic last entry into the series if they do that. But also, like, thinking along those lines to what you said, I do think at some point, whether it be after the 3rd movie or maybe going into the 4th or something, that I think they are going to maybe surpass Sully and surpass Neytiri as far as this story. Maybe they'll jump ahead, several years. Maybe they'll be killed off. But I do think this is going to be more. James Cameron has said he wants this to be a more epic, like, family saga that takes place over an extended period of time. This movie jumps, obviously, at least I would say maybe like 10, 15 years, perhaps, from when the first movie started.
Right.
So I think we could definitely see more passage of time, or more, high as the stakes get more intense and all that. I would certainly expect that characters could die that have been in the first 2 movies, like Jake or like Neytiri. But Cameron seems to have a pretty good idea about where it's going. I trust him. Of course, it's his baby, so I'm just excited to see more, and I'm keeping an open mind, I think, more than anything.
Agreed. I still think that Kiri is going to be a big part. Her 100%. Her lineage, her parentage will have some part. I feel like there's a big Awa spiritual element that still needs to be explored. But like you said, mainly I am just thrilled with this movie, excited for what's next. Go see Avatar. on the biggest screen in the best format that you can, because this is in the same way the first one was. This is an event that deserves to be celebrated with people on the big screen. And if you can't tell, we're very excited about it. So thank you for tuning into this episode. Thank you for listening and supporting us week in and week out. We would not be able to do it without you all.
Absolutely. Thank you all for listening and staying tuned as we move forward. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe on YouTube to stay up to date with all the new episodes and all the new content, articles, reviews coming your way. And those pages can all be found at Inside Film Room.
And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, all of those you can find us. Subscribe to our newsletter on our website, on our social pages, and be sure to come back in the new year. We're going to be off next week, but we will be returning with our best of 22 episode and our what we're looking forward to most in 2023. We'll see you then.